About 9 months ago, me and my partner had just bought a new 6-month-old boxer dog to keep our 3-year-old Labrador company, and decided it would be a good idea to take them for a walk in the countryside. We live close to a large city called Hull in northeast England, and decided to go for a walk in a rural-ish area north of the River Humber that ran through to the sea. Upon getting to a village close to our local landmark, a World War II army fort, we decided to walk close by and through the small patches of forest close to the nature reserve. We walked along a grass bunker toward the forest, and suddenly, my partner pointed out 2 young men had begun walking up the bank from the woods in a diagonal manner, as if they were trying to cut us off. From close by, I wondered if the young men were attending some sort of World War II reenactment, as they were both wearing camouflage pants and were also covered in dust and dirt. I thought nothing of them both, as I was sure they would pass us, but as they grew closer, it appeared they were aiming towards us. They were at least 10 feet away when they stopped, and one of them spoke up. The way he spoke still bothers me to this day, as he seemed to have a disregard for manners, or even trying to make sense. The young man wanted to know where we were planning on walking, and we told him we were not really sure, and would just see where we ended up. The young man then looked disappointed by this, and suggested that we should take his route, which went through the forest, to what he described as a great place to sightsee and sit, as there were benches to sit down. While the young man was telling us this, the other boy kept watch on our 2 dogs, almost exclusively, as if he wanted to make sure that they were always in his sightline. We did not have much knowledge of this area, and had not seen any other dog walkers, so we took the young man's advice after they pointed to an opening in the woods. Then we continued walking in that direction. The woods cast out about 30% of the sunlight, and as I looked back, I saw that the young men had not walked off, but were watching us walk into the forest. The track looked as though it was man-made, as it seemed to be the only walkable area throughout the forest. About 2 minutes into the trek, our Labrador began sniffing behind a bramble bush, which at first we thought nothing of, as both dogs sniff everywhere they can when we walk them. However, she began sniffing in one spot and rolling on the floor. We headed over to her and saw that she was sniffing some sort of shattered rubber pig mask with brown or red liquid on it. It looked disgusting, and my partner forced the dog away from it, as it looked as though flies were crawling all around it. Further into the walk, the woods had turned into a long path of trees and bushes that had become very narrow, but we could see a turn far ahead, and we agreed that if it led nowhere, we would turn back. I walked ahead and was on my phone preparing to take a photo of the woods when I felt several small pricks in my neck, chin, and part of my face. I let out a gasp to alert my partner, and he told me to stand still in an alarmed manner, followed by him carefully removing thin pieces of string away from my face. As it turns out, someone had tied fishing hooks on lines to a tree in the walkway. It's safe to say that we were both terrified, confused, and angry after this point, and hurried back to the car to head home. I don't want to sound cliché or anything, but as we drove off, I swear I could see someone through the back mirror peek out into the road. I'm a 33-year-old female from Los Angeles. 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I, as planned for 5 years, turned 30, sold everything we owned, including my car, took his Trailblazer, and decided to just travel around the States and Canada. I guess you could call us backpackers, as we tended to chase good weather, find a state park, and backcountry hike into the wilderness for days at a time. My brother likes to joke that we are anti-establishment hippies. We don't necessarily live off the grid, but between the two of us, we have one prepaid phone we use for emergencies or checking in with family and friends, and one MacBook which I use for work. I'm a freelance writer and content creator, and I am on retainer with a robotics company. I mostly write boring white papers or web content The whole point of our living situation is to live debt-free and have as few bills as possible. I only use free Wi-Fi, so 1 to 2 times a week we have to go to a city with a Starbucks. This background info is only important so you know more about who we are and how simply we live. Neither of us has social media and know very little of Reddit or Instagram or use any apps because our phone isn't a smartphone. We don't even text. Last summer, we decided to do some backcountry hiking in Arkansas. It's one of those states you don't ever really hear about other hikers visiting, but we read that it had some beautiful natural landscapes. It does. The rules at this particular park were pretty lax. We didn't need a permit. There were a few basic laws and guidelines, but there was no check-in needed. We had all the basics and had planned to do a 6-day hike, free in, free out. The whole time we were out there, we didn't see or hear another soul, but on day 1, we were prepping to move off trail and find a camping spot, as it was getting near dusk. Half-mile off trail is usually the standard for us. We took what looked like an animal trail, and about half a mile out, we saw a green 2-person tent. It was almost camouflaged in the foliage, so we came upon it almost by accident. Some backpackers prefer privacy, others are more social. We're the more social type. We've had some great experiences camping near other backpackers, sharing stories, food, and a joint or two. We were around 30 yards away from their tent. It was zip closed, so my boyfriend shouted a greeting to make our presence known. No movement and no sound. We assumed green tent guy either wasn't around or didn't want to be bothered, so we started off in a new direction to get some distance between us. We camped, never heard a peep. We moved along the next morning, completely forgetting about green tent guy, until nearing the end of day 5 on our trek back. We were again looking for a spot to camp off the trail, when we came upon the green tent again. This isn't that unusual, but normally backcountry hikers keep moving, so we really weren't expecting it. The tent flap was open, so my boyfriend yelled his greeting again. And nothing. My boyfriend wanted to go check it out, saying it's weird and maybe someone is hurt. I didn't like the idea from the get-go, because even though we hadn't had any bad experiences personally, we'd heard enough stories from other backpackers about hermits and mounted men that want privacy, carry guns, etc. But my boyfriend assured me we'd be fine, and if all else failed, we would offer him some weed to keep the peace and then carry on our way. As soon as we got within 20 yards of the place, the smell of decomposition was intense. My boyfriend had been hailing his greeting over the last 20 yards, and once the smell hit him, he stopped and turned to me and said, "What if we find a dead body?" My skin crawled. I was immediately afraid. I've never seen a dead body before and didn't want to. The closer we got to the tent, the worse the smell got. I knew for sure we were going to walk in and see some old camper's rotting corpse. What we found was worse than that. Outside the tent was a dead doe's legs, all 4 of them, covered in flies. It looked like the legs had been cut most of the way and then ripped off the rest of the way. It was a mess. Inside was the body and head of the deer, but the middle portion was swaddled in a blue fleece blanket that was blood-soaked at the bottom where the legs used to be. It was laying on its side, bottom facing the tent entry. The tail had been cut off, and the deer's private parts were covered in dried blood and a gape, like something had been penetrating it. The same with its mouth. The bottom portion was bent down at a scary broken-looking angle. The tent was open, so we could see everything without having to go inside. Not that we would have anyway, because at this point, the smell was almost debilitating. There was a dirty, almost empty clear bottle of Jergens baby oil, and a stained green and white fringed kitchen towel. That was it. I immediately started crying, and begged him to go. All he could muster was, "What the fuck?" And we turned and ran. We ran to the trail and jogged down it for as far as we possibly could go, until dusk was fully upon us. and we had to set up camp. We didn't go very far off the trail, and neither of us slept. We didn't start a fire or use headlamps after full dark. We just sat up whispering to each other, going over and over what we had just seen. Every little noise startled us. It was like our brains were on red alert. I kept thinking, any moment, a dead deer rapist would come back to his tent, see our footprints, or something, know we had been there, and track us back to our tent. I've never been so scared in my entire life. Just before dawn, we tore down and started out. My boyfriend stopped at the ranger station on our way out of the park to report what we had seen. The ranger was a young guy, around our age, and he looked as freaked out by our story as we were telling it. He wrote most of it down, and my boyfriend showed him on a map approximately where the tent was. He asked if we knew how the deer was killed, and at that point, we hadn't even thought about it. We just assumed it had been shot, but because of the blanket, we didn't see a wound. But we weren't exactly giving it an autopsy either. We have since shortened our backcountry hikes to a maximum of 4 days. We've also been a lot less eager to call out to other campsites, and have never approached another unmanned tent again. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. There is a hiking trail close to the school I go to. It's about 2 miles to reach the top, with a beautiful view over the entire valley. My friends and I went up one Saturday. Me, another girl, and a boy. The sun was beginning to set right as we started the 2-mile walk down. Terrible timing, but we knew the trail well. The atmosphere was creepy because it was getting dark, and I'm a paranoid person to begin with. We were about a mile away from returning to our car. I wasn't really paying attention, but I heard my friend say,
"What's that?"
I don't have good eyesight, so I looked, but I didn't see anything. "It's a girl," my guy friend said, and now I was on edge. It's 9 PM by this point, on a hiking trail that no other person would likely be on. As we got closer, I saw that she was sitting on the ground, in a pile of leaves, with her knees to her chest. She was rocking back and forth, dressed only in a pink nightgown. It was February. My friends and I rationalized it as someone being on a terrible trip in the woods. Feeling bad since that happened to my friend once, we debated asking if she needed help. That was until my friend saw that she was cradling a knife in her lap. Now we needed to leave. We picked up our pace, but still thought the girl could just be tripping. We started joking about the scenario to try and calm ourselves down. Then we saw a man running frantically up the trail, asking us if we had seen his daughter. This girl was about 20, not a little girl, although she was dressed like one. We said no, we hadn't seen her, because we were freaked out, thinking maybe she had escaped from him, and he was a trafficker or something. We ran the rest of the way to our car. Unfortunately, where we had parked, there wasn't a single other car to get help, or describe to the police, whom we were already calling now that we had service. But we did call them and reported what we saw. They searched the area, but we never received an update. That's all the stories I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers, as we are so close. And also consider watching some of my previous content. Thank you.